Hey everyone, it's been a while, but I've got a brand new video for you guys. About last week, I posted a small tutorial on my social media pages detailing just a brief explanation on how I go from a piano sketch to full orchestra. It didn't really explain everything that I do, but it explained a general gist. Today, I wanted to give you guys a tutorial that was a little bit more detailed and a little bit more centric to anyone that wants to compose orchestral scores, but starts off with the piano and then doesn't know where to go from there. So today we're going to go from this to this. All right, so first we're going to start off with our melody. You can compose whatever melody. For this piece, I started off with this melody here, which you heard in the beginning. And this melody here is supposed to give a lamenting quality to it, something that's a bit darker. We're in the key of F sharp minor, but I start on its fifth and just work around it and just build off of it motivically and just develop the melody a little bit for these 8 bars. Now, after that, I decided to come here and harmonize it. The way I harmonized it was just using my knowledge of harmony and using some pretty basic rules and principles to just harmonize it and give it its quality. Here's what the initial harmony sounded like before we did anything to it, before we do anything going to the orchestra and getting it to the orchestra. This is the bare bone basics of the harmony. So after we have our basic harmony down, in this next part, as you can see, I've added a bass line. Now, it's going to sound a little odd at first when you start adding a bass line because it can sometimes clash with the chords that you're producing, and sometimes voicings are going to sound a little weird. Also, this is going to sound like there's two people playing the piano when in reality that's not what a piano is supposed to sound like. But remember, we're not doing this for a piano piece, we're doing this for an orchestration. And the main key takeaway I can give you is remember that everything you do in this piano is going to be translated to an orchestra, and a lot of things are going to be changed once we put it into an orchestra. And especially right now, we're in a very rough stage, so we're not supposed to polish everything. So right here, we have our bass line, and our bass line is mainly playing off of the chords up top and just mainly following the root motion, but also having some independent lines here and there to create some interest so that the bass line isn't just very stagnant. So here's what this sounds like with the bass line. After we get our bass line down, I like to come to the next portion of this, which if you look at the sketch right here, you'll see that there's a lot more little added notes and additions. And this is what I like to do, where I like to add things like chromatic passing notes, maybe some neighboring tones, and maybe some just overall nice movement in the inner voices to help give us a sense of push and pull. And for this piece, I kind of wanted to have a bit more of a romantic feeling. So, like a romantic feeling, as in late romantic composers such as Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Chopin, and stuff like that, where their primary focus is focusing more on the dissonance and resolution than in than in having it be perfectly structured chords every time. So right here, this is what it's going to sound like after I get all the inner movements and voices down. So a good example of this is right here, the D sharp and the B. So that's a pretty big leap. So in order to close that gap, I decided to just add in some filler notes here and some chromatic passing tones just to get us to that B just a little more smoothly. And then right here in the A to the G sharp, I wanted to have a little kind of motivic idea. So I added this little rhythm, just riff there to just add some addition, especially considering that here their melody is pretty high up. So why not have something contrasting? Altogether, this all sounds like this. So once we have all this information in our piano sketch, I usually like to now start translating it to the orchestra. We have enough information to fill out some parts, and we can then use all that information to keep filling out the orchestration and make it sound very rich and full. Remember that orchestration is very personal and everyone can have a different taste on it. So someone can take this piano sketch that I just did and turn it into something completely different. But the way I decided to do it is to do it like this, where it's going to give me more of a kind of Dark Souls slash Bloodborne sound. You can make this sound very classical or very romantic by having just completely different orchestration or by arranging things differently. So here, our direct translation turns into something like this. So this is sounding pretty rough right now, but remember that this is always going to be the case whenever you start orchestrating because of the fact that you're translating it directly from a piano and we have to add a lot more detail to make it sound more like something an actual orchestra would play. So here I've just decided to copy every single voicing part and every single melodic line and just copy and paste it to each of the instruments. So here we have violin 1 that has just the melody in it, and then afterward it just follows down. Violins 2 play the second line below the melody. Violas 1, same thing. We have the next voice below it. However, if you didn't catch it in my piano sketch, we start off on just normal triads and then we move on into seventh chords. So this voice, I decided to count it as a completely separate voice and just have it come in a bar and a half later. It adds interest and it helps the melody and orchestration feel like it's going to grow. And then afterward, we just have the rest of the voicing spread out. And for right now, we have the melody and the bass line only on one instrument each. The melody is only being played on first violins here, and the double basses are the only thing doing the bass line. So now compare the old one to this, and you see that there's a lot more information here. Not only are we doubling certain things like the bass line, but we also rearrange some of the harmony in order to go with the string section more and have the harmony be a little bit more fleshed out and not in the way of things like the bass line and the melody. So two tricks that are very popular to do is to get the melody from the top part and put it an octave below and things like the cellos. So right here, we're going to have the first violins and the cellos. So let me go ahead and solo those and play it for you. So that gives you a very rough idea of how we're giving the melody more of a frequency shift so that we can have more of that melody come out in this thick orchestration. If I was to take away the melody from this and only open up the harmony, this is what it would look like. As you can see, we only have the bass is being doubled, but all of the harmony and all of the voices have been kind of shifted around. A good way to kind of look at what I did was that I essentially flipped around the top two voices and just put them underneath each other. So that now everything kind of is fleshed out. And remember, when you do this, don't leave it on the same instrument. Make sure that you're actually translating it to an instrument like how I did here. I translated the bottom two lines, and instead of them playing on cellos and violas, now they're playing on the second violins. And full together, now this is going to sound a bit more fleshed out. So here's what this sounds like. As you can hear, we're starting to get closer to the end product now, and this is only strings, mind you. So there's nothing else, like no brass, no percussion. But now is when we start getting to that kind of stuff. So now, once we finally get our orchestra to that point, we can finally start transitioning and putting more stuff in the orchestra to fill out the sound even more. So now we can add things like percussion, and we can also add things like some brass. Here, I've added brass accents to the end just to accent the volume increase to add more intensity. And as well, I even added a choir. The choir is very basic. It's only just the chords, but voiced a little differently. And the automation is fairly simple, and this is all in just one patch. So here is the string section by itself. So as you can hear, the string section, even just by itself, sounds very full. After we do that, I decided to go ahead and put some percussion accents in here to add a bit more of a accent in the beginning and as well as an accent on the ending chord, just to make sure that we get that kind of intensity of the track a little bit. So here's what the strings and the percussion are going to sound like together. As you can see, the percussion adds a nice little character to it in the beginning and a nice punctuation in the end. So now we can move on to brass. The brass I did not want to use right away because a lot of the time brass will add a lot of warmth, a lot of character, a lot of depth, and a lot of punchiness and loudness to a track. So I decided to keep the brass towards the later half and also increase their volume at the end of the piece to give more of a sense of a climax at the end. So here's what everything that you just heard sounds like with the brass. So remember, the brass is not supposed to be at the forefront here. We're just adding some harmonic information as well as just accenting what we already have. So here in the brass, this is all that's playing. So that's all the brass is playing. The brass is only playing some small harmonies here and there to just help give that climax and help give a brassier edge to the strings and help them reach a louder volume and dynamic in general on the piece. So now, once we finally have all of this, I decided to add a choir just for some interest. The choir that I'm using here is it's not a very good library, but it's not too bad. And it adds just a little bit of harmonic interest to it because choirs can give this human element into the orchestra. So here's what the choir sounds like just by itself. So the choir gives a nice little human element to everything. And of course, again, like I said, this choir library isn't very good. This is the choir library from the UVI Orchestral Suite. And this is just a mixed choir preset. Remember, by having these kinds of libraries in the background, they can add definition and character to a sound, but not necessarily derive away from the sound because of the fact that they are lower quality than the other libraries. These other libraries that I have here are libraries that are much more expensive and sound a lot better than what this choir library is. And just a quick note, if you have some libraries that are weaker than others, try to understand your libraries and orchestrate for your libraries effectively. Just like you would orchestrate for a real orchestra, if you had a orchestra that had a very strong string section, but had maybe a weaker woodwind section, maybe don't orchestrate for the woodwinds and have them featured as much. Maybe try featuring more of the strings. Or same is true if your orchestra has a better brass section than does a string section. There's a lot of times where I had some pretty weak libraries, just like this choir library here. And basically what I did is I just put any library that was higher quality or had more strength to it in the forefront. So that would be things like my strings and my brass and my percussion. All of that's in the forefront, while the choirs are going to be more subdued and in the back to add just a certain character to it, but not necessarily take away from anything else. So now, after everything has been added, we can finally play it all together. And here is our finished product. So from that starting melody and starting harmony sketch all the way to here, we have gone through a journey to just get here and understand what it is that we simply need to do in order to get our orchestra to sound good and full and rich and get our idea out and orchestrated. So here's what everything sounds like put together. So that's how I go from a piano sketch to a full orchestra. And I hope that this answered some of the questions that you may have had when you originally watched this short. Or if you didn't watch the short, I hope you just took away something from this video. Remember, orchestration is something that's very different to everybody, and everyone has a different style of doing it. So you don't have to follow all of my tips here, but some of the concepts I give you can help give you a certain sound or can help allow you to experiment a bit. Always, always, always experiment with orchestration and take some time to just learn things about the instruments that you're writing for, because you might learn a thing or two. So thank you so much everybody for watching this video, and I hope you guys learned something about not only how I orchestrate, but maybe give you some ideas of how you can orchestrate and incorporate it into your own style. And remember to always have fun with orchestration. Try to learn from the great composers that you love and that you idolize, and try learning from them. That helps you with your style and helps you understand their style a little bit more. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below, and I will try to get to everyone to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.